other areas with Iran, Afghanistan, Iraq, I mean, just in the big picture, where does it look like things are going for the United States, Europe? If you had to project the lines out, what do you see happening in our society overall? Because with the economy, it just all of it looks like an empire that's falling in on itself, oppressive domestic police states, both parties backing it. I mean, it doesn't look good.
It doesn't at all, and the operative factor here is whether the president is really a part of reality or whether he's pretty much already given up his tasks here. I don't know if many of your listeners or viewers saw the interview that he gave to a Western reporter, anchorman in Beijing. The fellow started by saying, "Now, Mr. President, we'd like to talk about the problems here in China, but of course the U.S. has its own problems." And Bush cut him off. He said, wait a second, problems? The United States of America doesn't have any problems. Now, he was serious. And if that's his attitude, with the economy falling apart, with the stuff in Georgia going on, with Iraq and Iran, I mean, if he thinks there are no problems, then he's divorced from reality. He's certifiable, and it would probably be a good idea for the psychiatrists in Washington, D.C., to try to get him committed. Although you'd have to do Cheney at the same time. So this is a very large factor. So it really is the bizarre circumstance here that if we can get through the next 5 months without anything really, really bad happening, then there's some hope for the future. But as you know, my concern is that these fellows can start a major war within the next 5 months, and I see that possibility as so important and so worrying that everybody needs to do their part to get to their representatives and senators and say, look, no war on Iran, no matter how it happens, whether the Israelis start it or however it happens. It's not going to help our country, and it will be a disaster for our troops.
The problem I see here is that I coldly research and then coldly come about with my beliefs, and then I get on air and get all hothead about it, so it looks like I'm wild or looks like I'm ego-driven, but I'm actually not. And as I get older, I lose more and more of my ego. I actually kind of miss it because it's a good propulsion system. I can tell you don't have much of an ego. You're more of a scientific type guy with your mindset. But then when I look at these powerful people more and more, especially these neocons and others, it really seems like they are very childlike and have no sense of responsibility, and that they are ego-driven. And I'm not even saying I'm some wonderful person or you're some wonderful person, but just in life, being a father, having responsibilities, or having some employees, or it seems like I have more concern about the world's future than even they do. It seems like I don't even know what I'm really saying here. It's like an ego-driven recklessness when you talk about the Grenada syndrome, about needing to go kick some little island's butt so you look good or feel tough. But then I look at the psychology and the statements and the things these people say, and it even scares me more because I realize that they really are just absolutely psychopathic.
Look at Bush and his record, even growing up as a child. He never was held accountable for anything, Alex. For nothing was he ever held accountable. More recently, I remember 4 or 5 years ago when Bob Woodward was writing books about this administration. They interviewed him and said, "Are you interested in do you care about your place in history?" And Bush said, "History? We'll all be dead." Well, you know what? I always thought that was kind of weird. And then just 2 weeks ago, Bush said exactly the same thing. History? We'll all be dead. So, what more do you need than that to show how irresponsible or unaccountable
he's not thinking about any future generations. It's the ultimate selfishness. It's, I don't care what people 50 years, 100 years say, because it's all about me, not his grandchildren, not his progeny, not his name, no sense of community, no sense of the future, no sense of connection to the rest of society. And it's admitted, he brags that he would kill little animals, that he would torture animals to death. That is a psychopath.
Well, he did, as a matter of fact. He used to stick firecrackers in the orifices of toads back there in Texas and blow them up. And Colleen Rowley, my good friend, who is the FBI person who blew the whistle on 9/11, she tells me that if that ever appeared on the record of an applicant for employment with the FBI, the application would automatically be thrown in the trash, because that's a sign of subsequent psychotic behavior. Now, let me just finish with one thing that scares me most, and that is, if we do strike Iran, Iran, as I've said before, has immense possibilities of striking back at us, to include cutting off our supply lines of our troops in Iraq. What is the United States going to do then? Well, somebody said, well, send in more troops. There aren't any more troops. But what do we have? We have these mini nukes. And that is what they're falling back on, because these neocons, they have no real appreciation for the difference between high explosive weaponry and the kinds of nuclear weaponry that hasn't been used since Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And so, this is really bizarre, because it will be the only thing that will be available for Bush to use under those circumstances, and that's why there's a real premium on our all doing everything we can to make sure that nothing happens that will perpetrate this kind of air attack on Iran, because the way they will retaliate might force us to either retreat ignominiously or use these, quote, mini nukes in a way that would just let the nuclear genie right out of the bottle.
And by the way, the only thing backing up the dollar now is the view as this is the hegemonic lone unipolar superpower. I mean, wouldn't a U.S. rout and defeat and collapse probably bring us into depression?
Well, I think that even if the worst didn't happen and the use of nuclear weapons were avoided, those straits in Hormuz would be closed. The price of oil would skyrocket, and we're talking about worldwide depression were all this to happen. Now, so most people conclude, well, then of course, McGovern, what are you worried about? It's so crazy the president would never do that. Well, right. You look at what he did with respect to Iraq. He's not really cognizant of what's going on around him in the world. I mean, I was just telling somebody just the other day, look, when back in the spring, when there was all kinds of talk in the press, and even in his own press conferences run by his press secretary, $4 oil, okay? Now, he has his own press conference the next day, and when the reporter said, well, how are you looking, Mr. President, at $4 oil? And he says, what? Say that again? How are you looking at the possibility? $4 oil? Well, nobody told you. Think it's $4? Nobody told me. I'll have to ask about that.
That's like a fable. That's like a Aesop's fable with the crazy king that doesn't know the city's burning, and he's dancing around playing his flute or his ukulele. I mean, it's just, I don't know what's more scary, Ray McGovern, that we know they armed and trained Georgia for this, but whether they gave them the green light or not, if they gave them the green light, it shows they're crazy and miscalculated. But if they didn't give the green light, it means that they don't even control their own puppet states, meaning they're completely out of control. What's more scary?
Well, the latter is more scary, because that means that just as the Georgians think that they can get away with this kind of thing, so too the Israelis. And the Israelis, unfortunately, will be right, because there's nothing that will stop the United States of America to springing to the defense of Israel, whether or not Israel starts it